The key challenge, I think, for all very large cities and many middle-sized cities around the world is how to govern an urban place.
Welcome to the festival!
There are more large cities around the world than ever before. And I'm not just talking about the megalopolises of 10 million and more. I'm talking about the 1,000 cities on the planet that have more than 250,000 in population. What we see is that, the classic trade-off that has to be made by low-income populations is they can't afford housing in close unless they squat, and then they run a risk of being kicked out. So the one alternative is to go far away, so you trade off the price of house for a high cost of transportation and hope that you can get to the job. One solution to that is to improve public transportation and access to the poor to public transportation. A second solution is to create the conditions for favorable employment generation locally where they're living. For instance, personal services, laundry, gardening, tailoring, food services, health services, all of those things are local in nature and can be really created anywhere given the right conditions. But for that to happen, local governments and citizens have to find more ways to connect together. There has to be more channels of communication, more participation on the part of low-income communities in governing their own affairs, as well as putting pressure on local governments and national governments to be responsive to them.
If the political world doesn't see that it needs to find a different way of relating that is less so rigid, rule-bound, hierarchical, there's going to be a massive, rupture, in a sense, between the citizens and those people who think they make or should be making the decisions.
I've been living in a city called Almere. And Almere is a city that was built 40 years ago now, and it was conceived as the new town. It's a new town. There was nothing, there was water, and then there was a city. And somehow the people who planned that city thought they could also almost plan the social processes that would take place there. And this is simply not the case. You can build the context and build some structures, but then in the end the people themselves have to make the juice out of it, and they can only do that in close interaction. And while you can set the boundaries, set the context for that simulation, in the end you have to let it loose and see what happens.
They're engaged with the government and so obvious a rhetoric of resource utilization.
I think Amsterdam is quite a positive example. We don't really have ghettos or milieus that are in very bad condition, and probably the housing corporations are one of the main keys to this mix of use, because they also own social houses in the inner city. So up to now the mix has been actually quite good. That if you didn't have that much money, there was also a possibility to live in the city centre. Now through politics that's changing a bit, because they're trying to raise the rents for the houses which are on the better spots, and that will create a bit more of segregation. So that's a serious risk.
One of the solutions that hasn't been pressed enough, in my view, is simply to exchange the ideas between and among cities. And the advantages are, that a city that wants a new idea, for instance, about how to create jobs in low-income areas, knows that if they see that solution in some other place, that many false starts and traps and pitfalls and so have already been overcome by the cities that they're visiting. And that's the value of going there and seeing it, and rather than trying it on their own, particularly in the short political cycles that local governments have. There's no incentive for a local government, because of their short political cycles, to try something new that's long-term. And most of these problems are long-term problems. So my message has been, open the floodgates of this city-to-city exchange. We'll all benefit from it.